Have you ever heard someone say that you are worth less than a dog? Well, I have, and the man who told me that today stretches out his hand, dirty with shame, begging for alms in the same square where he humiliated me. I'm 79 years old, and this is the story of how life gave back, twofold, everything it threw at me. But I'm not here to take revenge, nor to be applauded. I'm here because my throat can't take this lump anymore. That's been stuck in my throat since 1974. The lump of someone who swallowed insult after insult, silent for fear of losing what little they had, of someone who remained quiet while their soul screamed inside. I remember the smell of wet cement that morning, the cold lunchbox on my lap, and the taste of the reheated coffee my wife made with the last few pennies of the month. I still believed that dignity was enough. I still believed that if I did my best, someone would notice. But he noticed, just in the worst way. I had just finished helping, unload some boards at the construction site, sweaty and with raw hands. The doctor showed up, wearing that expensive suit and that disgusted smile on his face. He dropped the bread on the floor, and when I went to pick it up to return it, he spat near my feet and said, "Trash doesn't touch my food." I didn't cry, not that day. I stood there with the bread in my hand and my soul on the ground. I returned home in silence. I told my wife that everything was fine. I smiled at my daughter as if the world were still safe. But that sentence never left my chest. Little by little, my silence turned into an illness. The food seemed to have no taste. The laughter of others made me feel sick. His face even appeared in my dreams. And the worst part is that no one noticed, because an old, poor and quiet man becomes a landscape. Sometimes we only start dying when we stop telling the truth. And now, after so many years, after everything he took from me, I saw that same man, disfigured by time and ruin, eating leftovers on a park bench. But before that day arrives, there is a lot you need to know. Because this story didn't start there. It started much earlier. And the most painful part is exactly what happened along the way. I almost didn't have the courage to tell you this. I choked up many times before hitting the record button, and until now, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. But what I carry inside already weighs too much on its own. Maybe no one will listen. Maybe they'll just pass by like they always have. But if you're still here, it shows that I'm not talking to myself. Leave your like and stay with me until the end. Subscribe, because there are still things I've never told anyone, not even for my own family. It was 1974. Marseille still smelled of rust and old fish. The city was growing like a disorderly plant, swallowing up old neighborhoods with cold, modern buildings. They said that this was progress, but for those who worked with a hoe, all that changed was the name of the dust. I was a construction worker. I would wake up at 4:20 in the morning when the sky was still a dark cloth and the silence weighed more than my body. The floor of my house chilled my bones, and the smell of filtered coffee mixed with that of the overbeaten aluminum pans. My wife would leave everything ready: coffee, stale bread heated on the grill, the lunchbox wrapped in a floury dish towel. She always said, "Go with God and come back in one piece." Back then, whole was just a word. We came back alive but broken inside. The construction site was in the city center, on a large plot of land that had once been an old mansion. All that was left was rubble, rats, and cement. We worked in the sun, in the wind, in the rain, as if everything was the same. It was brick upon brick, bucket, broom, thick putty, loose screws. No one knew anyone else's name, just nicknames. I was the old man, and he wasn't even the oldest. That's where I saw him for the first time. They called him Doctor, but he wasn't a doctor. He was the owner of the construction company, the land, the engineers, and the local politician. A man in a dark suit, white shirt, and gelled hair that shone in the sun. He arrived in a black car with 2 bodyguards and an air of someone who had never walked barefoot. He passed me for the first time on a scorching hot day. I was sweeping the floor of the foundation, my shirt wet on my back and my forehead burning. I saw his bread fall from the pocket of his leather briefcase. It was a small croissant, the kind you get at an expensive bakery. I grabbed it instinctively with my hand dirty with lime and dust and went to return it. "Your bread fell, sir." He stopped. He looked at my hand. He looked at my face, and he said, "Trash doesn't touch my food." I froze, with the bread in my hand, with the world stopping inside. He turned his back and kept walking as if nothing had happened. One of the security guards laughed, a dry laugh from the corner of his mouth. I stood there with the croissant wilting in my fingers, feeling my dignity slip away along with the sweat. I went home quietly that night. My wife was waiting for me with rice and eggs. She put the food on the table and asked if I was tired. I nodded. We ate without saying anything. But she knew. She always knew. There are things we don't need to say. She looked into my eyes and then lowered hers. There was nothing else to ask. On. Sunday I went to the market with my daughter. She was 6 years old. She wanted a doll, but we could only buy 2 apples, one for her, one for me. I dropped mine on purpose. I said I wasn't hungry. I saw her smile, happy to have kept both. And right there, in that gesture, I knew that this was my life, hiding my pain so as not to dim the light of others. But on Monday, he went back to work, and he kept coming back, always with the same suit, the same arrogance, the same look. They didn't see us. He passed by us as if he were a broom sweeping ants from the floor. The engineers called him boss and laughed at his jokes as if they needed to survive. And he seemed to feed on fear, on silence, on forced reverence. One day he showed up with a blonde woman by his side, wearing high heels, sunglasses, and a perfume that was too sweet for that place. While we were sweating, she took pictures of the work as if it were a painting. She commented out loud, "It seems that even the smell of these people is different." He replied with a smile, "This isn't the smell of people, it's the smell of survival." I don't know how I held back the urge to speak, but I held back. Because if you have a daughter to raise, you can't respond with a slap in the face. We respond with an empty stomach, with a bent spine, with a swallowed silence. That day I took a long time to eat. I sat behind the warehouse, among planks and torn cement bags. The lunchbox was still warm. Rice, beans and ground beef, but the taste was like stone. Every time he came over I would lower my eyes, not out of cowardice, but because every time he looked at me, it was like he was tearing another piece of me away, and after a while we start to hide the pieces that are left. There was a moment, small but powerful, when I thought he was going to fall. He was climbing a scaffold in smooth shoes and he slipped. For an instant, his body swayed in the air. I saw it, and the reflex made me move. Forward, instinctively, I reached out my arm. He steadied himself and looked at me, for the first time, straight in the eyes. "Don't touch me." That was all. And he went downstairs, adjusting his jacket as if nothing had happened. I worked again with my hands shaking, not from fear, but from hatred. A silent hatred, ancient, that hides where words cannot reach, a type of pain that does not bleed, but leaves a wound. The next few months were all the same. I built the floors of the building, brick by brick, knowing that I would never step foot in that elevator. I saw the marble finishes, the automatic doors, the golden chandeliers arriving in boxes. I knew that none of that was for me, or for anyone else sweating there. And yet, I continued. Not for him, not for me. I continued for my daughter, for the coat she needed in the winter, for the tooth that hurt and that we couldn't pull out, for the hot coffee on the weekend, for the thick soup on Sunday. But each day, I died a little, more. And his shadow, even though it was far away, followed me home. I washed my hands in the sink, but his smell stayed on my skin. His voice, his phrase, "Trash doesn't touch my food," repeated in my head like an eternal drop, dripping into the silence. And what killed me the most was knowing that he didn't even remember me. And that's why, when I saw him in that square years later, dirty, alone, begging, I didn't smile. I didn't feel pleasure. I just felt a strange weight lift from my chest. But that part is not yet. I worked double shifts without missing a day. I arrived before the sun. I left after the night had swallowed everything. I never complained. Not even when the pain in my back made me double my body. Not even when my fingers bled from carrying so much rebar. Not even when lunch was just a boiled egg that my wife divided into 3. I thought I was doing the right thing. That dignity was enough, that someone would notice. But that day, it was like the world had spat on me. The bread fell out of his pocket, a small piece wrapped in a white napkin. I just bent down, picked it up, and held it out like anyone would. Only I wasn't anyone to him. I was something that shouldn't exist. He looked at my hand, then my face, as if he had seen an animal, a mouse holding his food, and then he spoke, coldly, without raising his voice. Trash doesn't touch my food. That's all. But that was stronger than any slap. The others pretended not to hear, but they heard. Everyone heard. No one laughed, no one defended me, no one looked me in the eye. I didn't look them in the eye either. I picked up the broom, went to another corner, and pretended to sweep where it was already clean. My heart was beating so loudly that it hurt my ears. That piece of bread turned into a stone in my hand. I threw it in the trash without thinking. But the sentence stuck to me like a stain that not even time could erase. I arrived home without saying a word. My wife noticed. She tried to hug me, but I dodged her. She insisted, what it was, nothing, I'm just tired. But it wasn't tiredness. It was shame. It was a new wound, a silent pain. And the worst part, I knew that no one would ever defend me from that kind of humiliation, not even God at that moment, because at that moment I started to disappear inside. At that moment I discovered that there is a type of pain that has no blood but kills all the same. At that moment, silence was born that lasted for decades. I thought about dropping everything the next day. I swear I did. Staying home, running after another job, swallowing my shame and moving on. But then I remembered my daughter's medicine, the pain she was feeling in her ear that we had been pushing down with cloth compresses and prayers. I remembered the overdue electricity bill, the note from school asking for supplies, the late rent, and worst of all, the face of my wife crying quietly in the bathroom, thinking I couldn't hear. So I came back, with my head down. I came back like someone who comes back to the gallows. I started walking slower around him. I started avoiding any contact. I, who had never been afraid of any man, started to fear even the smell of his perfume in the hallway. I avoided making eye contact. I hid in corners. I became the shadow of the shadow. And every day, every single day, I remembered that. Trash doesn't touch my food. But what could I do? Go head on and lose everything, get fired, and watch my daughter get worse, watch my wife despair? No, life has taught me that a man who loves swallows much more than he talks, and swallowing this was what kept me alive, and also what started to kill me. The revolt grew slowly, like a crack in concrete. You don't see it at first, but when you do, everything is cracked inside. There were nights when I would turn from one side to the other in bed, with the pillow wet with sweat, angry at myself for having lowered my head, angry at the world for making us choose between dignity and survival. And with every arrogant phrase he said in the hallways, with every mocking laugh with the suits, I wished that one day he would feel the bitter taste of being treated like nothing. But life is not a soap opera. Justice takes time. Sometimes it doesn't even arrive. And at that time I had already understood that the poor only have the right to one thing, to remain silent. So I continued, quietly. His face appeared in my dreams like a nightmare, and Yet every day I woke up, drank my cold coffee, put on my torn boots and went to work. Not by me, but because I had a family depending on my ability to swallow frogs without choking. The truth is, at that time, I wasn't living. I was resisting. But too much resistance is also tiring. And the worst tiredness is the one we can't share with anyone. Do you think you would have done things differently if you were in my place? The years passed like old trains, noisy, slow, and with too many people, carrying weight they didn't choose. I stayed there even after the work was finished. I took a job on another construction site for the same contractor because poor people don't have the luxury of choosing their boss. The city changed. The sidewalks got wider, the buildings taller, the advertisements in the windows more modern, but the owners' hearts remained the same. And he, that doctor, still showed up from time to time, with a new suit, a different car, a watch shining on his wrist. He passed by as he always did, looking down on everything, without looking anyone in the eye. It seemed like nothing could stop that man, that he was made of iron, of stone, of poison. But time has a strange way of returning everything that was spat out. I heard about his first fall from the kitchen radio while I was having coffee. The announcer was reading a quick news story. Marseille construction company investigated for fraud in public tenders. I almost spit my coffee on the plate. They didn't say the name, but I knew. Deep down, I knew. The following week, rumors began to arrive at the construction site, whispers among the foremen, suspicious looks among the engineers. They said he had lost a big contract with the city government, that there were people on the inside handing over evidence, that the IRS was onto him, and I won't lie, I felt something strange in my chest. It wasn't joy, but it wasn't sadness either. It was a mixture of astonishment and delayed justice, as if the universe had finally woken up from its blindness. Later, I learned that his wife, the blonde with the high heels and cruel phrases, had left with her partner. They fled to Paris with money hidden in suitcases. He stayed behind. His name was in the mud, and his bank account was frozen. The first time I saw him after that, I almost didn't recognize him. He was thinner. His hair, once shiny, was starting to thin. His jacket no longer looked new, and for the first time, he walked slowly. There were no security guards, no imported cars, no sycophantic smiles. He passed me on the sidewalk of a market downtown. I was carrying a bag of bread, heading home. He passed by and pretended not to see me, but he saw me. I know he saw me. His face stiffened, his spine bent slightly, and for a moment he was human. I looked, firmly, like I had never had the courage to look before. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The city also began to turn its back. Newspapers were already carrying headlines with his name. People who had previously served him with reverence now avoided even saying his name. It was as if he were a virus that no one wanted to have in their bodies anymore. Little by little, he disappeared from the circles of power, from the parties, from the meetings. His companies began to be sold, his properties seized. I saw one of his buildings being demolished by another construction company. It was the strongest symbol I could imagine. An empire crumbled into the same dust that we breathed every day. And me, I continued my simple life. I continued waking up early, cleaning floors, taking care of my wife, my daughter, and the grandchildren who came later. I was never rich. I never had more than I needed, but I had what he never had, respect from my family. What he built with arrogance crumbled in silence, and what I built with humility remained standing. The curious thing is that no one seemed to realize how big the fall was. Only those who knew the top and the basement. But I saw every brick of his castle fall one by one, and I didn't raise my hand, not even to applaud, not even to help, because there is justice that cannot be achieved with hate. It happens over time, and time, oh time, has more power than any revenge. But what happened next? No one would have believed it. It was a normal Thursday. Clear skies, light wind, and my granddaughter tugging at my hand with the eagerness of a child who still believes the world is a good place. She wanted to go to the playground in the square, the one near the old station, where there are still some rusty toys and a seesaw that creaks as if it were crying. I took her there whenever I could. It was our ritual. She loved the slide, even with the peeling paint, and I liked the silence, the smell of the trees, hearing her laughter as if it were music that washed away the dirty memories of the week. But that day, the silence didn't bring peace. I remember the feeling exactly, as if time had stopped, or worse, as if it had come back and hit me in the chest. We were approaching the playground when I saw him, sitting on the wooden bench, the one that's always cracked and no one wants to use. His beard was long, the white hairs scattered across a face that was once smooth and proud. His clothes were dark, dirty, grimy like the floor of a bus station. His shoes, they weren't even shoes anymore. They were hollow leather shells. And on his lap, a piece of cardboard with crooked letters. "I'm hungry." I stopped, unintentionally, unable to. My granddaughter let go of my hand and ran toward the swing, not noticing anything. I stood there frozen, with the sun shining on my face, feeling my heart beat as if for the first time in a long time. He didn't see me right away. His eyes were downcast, his fingers trembling on his knees. And even there, broken, dirty, invisible, there was still something in him that fought not to ask. A remnant of pride, perhaps, or just the shame of someone who thought the world would be his forever. For a second, I thought it was someone else, that maybe I was mistaken. But no, it was him. The same man who once looked at me as if I were less than the ground, who spat on my gesture, who reduced me to nothing with a single sentence. Now there, where no one recognized him anymore, where the world passed him by as he passed us by, I thought about leaving. I thought about pretending I didn't see him, but my feet wouldn't obey. I approached slowly. Each step seemed to weigh a ton. I felt my throat close, the air hot, the memory coming back like a punch, the same bench, the same city, but everything inverted. He raised his head slowly as if he smelled shame in the air, and he saw me. In his eyes, a fright, an internal stumble, as if his soul had choked on its own pride. He recognized it. I saw it. His expression changed, from despair to fear. It wasn't fear of me, it was fear of the reflection. I looked, and he lowered his eyes again. We remained silent for a few seconds. The world went on around us, children running, mothers talking, a street vendor passing by with popcorn. But there, between the two of us, time stood still. He didn't say anything. Neither did I, because there was nothing to say. But I saw it. I saw in his eyes the weight of what he had been. I saw the hunger, not just the hunger in his stomach, but the hunger for forgiveness, the hunger for regret. I saw a man who had lost everything, and now didn't even have the words to ask for help. I took what I had out of my pocket, 2 coins, and the rest of the bread my wife had packed that morning. I placed it next to him, without saying a word. He didn't thank me. He didn't even need to. The gesture was the answer in itself, because at that moment, on that dirty and forgotten park bench, justice happened, silently, without applause, without an audience, only with the teary eyes of an old man who never forgot. And even there, even after everything, I couldn't feel pleasure. Only pity, pity for what he had become, pity for what I had become trying not to be like him. And then my granddaughter called me, "Grandpa, come push me on the swing." I swallowed hard. I wiped my eyes, as if wiping away more than just dust. And I went, but as I walked away, I looked once more. He was still there, bent over, silent, with the poster on his lap, and in his eyes, what was left of a crumbled empire. But what happened after that was what really destroyed me. I stopped. I stood there, 2 or 3 steps ahead of him, holding the bag with the coins and the bread already crushed by the heat of my hand. My granddaughter, a few feet away, smiled on the swing as if nothing was happening, as if the world was still a fair place. But there, between me and him, there was a scene that no one else saw, just the two of us. Time, once again, seemed to have stopped, and it wasn't the noise of the children, nor the smell of sweet popcorn in the air that broke the silence. It was the weight of the gaze, mine, his. He raised his head slowly, as if he felt he was about to encounter a ghost. His eyes were red, sunken, moist, but it wasn't just from hunger or the street. It was from something older, more bitter. It was as if he knew that one day that moment would come, that the steps he had climbed with contempt, he would have to descend with his soul in his hands. When our eyes met, I saw the split second in which he recognized me. He had no doubt. He didn't need to think. He recognized me, and in that instant, he trembled. He trembled like someone who feels their body betray their pose, like someone who realizes that the castle they lived in was made of paper. He didn't say anything, not a gesture, not a hello. He just lowered his eyes. For the first time in decades, he was speechless. And me? I didn't say it either, because I didn't need to. The justice I had carried inside me for years didn't taste like revenge. It tasted like silence returned. I didn't want him to apologize. I didn't want him to explain himself. I just wanted him to feel what I felt that day, with the bread in my hand and my soul on the ground. That's all. And on that park bench, without a crowd, without judges, without God or police, he felt it. I saw in his eyes everything he never said. The "I'm sorry" trapped, the "I was wrong" swallowed, the "I became what I despised" written on his forehead even without a voice. I saw an old man imploded inside, a man who thought he was eternal, now trembling before the reflection of his own past. I stood there in silence. And what silence! A silence that only those who have swallowed much pain understand. A silence that screams without sound, that weighs more than words. And he, there with his head down, no longer had a shield. For the first time, he was all that was left. Just skin, bones, and regret. I took a deep breath, feeling the afternoon wind blow on my face. It was cool but not cold. It was as if the city itself had stopped to watch, as if everything around it had bowed for a moment to make room for this silent reckoning. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say anything, because at that moment I understood. He had already heard everything, not from my mouth, but from life. And life knows how to scream in the cruelest way, leaving you alone with what you planted. Finally, I put the bread next to him, the coins on top, and just stood there looking. He didn't look up again. He didn't have the courage, and I left without turning my back. Because if you've had your face stepped on, you learn to walk away with your head held high. That day I discovered that it is not revenge that cleanses the soul. It is the recognition of the fall, and yet, what came next, I could never have imagined. I took a loaf of bread and a juice out of my pocket. They had been there since early morning, carefully wrapped in a light blue cloth, the kind you find in simple homes, smelling of coffee and flour. My wife always said, "Take one more, in case someone needs it more than you." She was never one to know about omens, but she had a way of sensing things before they happened. And that morning, perhaps, she felt that that someone would be precisely the man who had once made me feel less than a dog. I lowered myself slowly. My back complained, my joints cracked. But I got to the ground like someone fulfilling an ancient duty, one of those that the soul demands even when the heart is reluctant. I placed the bread and juice next to him with the delicacy of someone leaving a flower on a grave. And for a second, I stood there, not for him, but for me. It was my gesture, my closure. I didn't say anything. I didn't make a speech. I didn't raise a finger. I didn't demand an apology. I didn't return the insult. I didn't remember the phrase, because he already remembered. And that bread, that painful, dry, simple bread, hurt more than any shouted curse word. There, between the two of us, there was only one gesture, and within that gesture, everything that life tried to teach those who wanted to learn from pain. The silence I offered at that moment was the loudest speech he had ever heard, because the bread was not food, it was a mirror, an exact reflection of what he had once denied me, dignity. He didn't move, he didn't touch the bread or the juice. He kept looking at the floor as if he was ashamed to even breathe, and I understood. Sometimes the hardest punishment is knowing that the person you tried to destroy took pity on you. There on that park bench, between the dust of the trees and the smell of the street, the past came back whole and knelt down. Not because I asked it to, but because time knows how to make those who once walked over others kneel down as if they were trash. The superiority I felt did not come from pride. It came from peace, from the certainty that I was no longer the silent man with bread in his hand and a trampled soul. I was the old man who, even carrying the dirtiest memory, still chose to offer bread where he received contempt. I stood there for a moment longer, not because I wanted to, but because my body no longer obeyed the rush. It was as if the years had decided to stop there with me, all piled up on my back, forcing me to feel, until the end, the weight of that moment. The sun was already beginning to set, escaping through the tall leaves of the trees, as if it wanted to hide itself. The warm light filtered through the branches, casting crooked shadows on the dirt floor and cracked sidewalk, as if the square itself bore scars. It was a beautiful, sad light, the kind that seems to warn that the day is about to end, and with it, something inside us too. He remained there, motionless. Not a muscle on his face moved, not even his eyes. It was as if shame had glued him to the bench, or maybe it was fear of looking at me and seeing what he had been, or just a last attempt, pathetic and human, to maintain his pose. The pose of someone who once ruled everything and now had nowhere to go. It was hard to tell, but his silence spoke, loudly. I watched. The cardboard on my lap, handwritten with a failing pen, trembled slightly in the wind. I'm hungry. 2 words that summed up an entire fall. So short, but so full of the past, of shattered arrogance, of chewed-up pride. My heart, I didn't know what to do with it. Part of me wanted to walk away without looking back. The other part wanted to sit down next to him and ask, "Remember me?" But I did neither. I just took a deep breath, felt the ache of my aging joints, and let time do its thing. I let him, for the first time, feel the presence of someone he had never considered a person. Then I stood up, unhurriedly, carefully, like someone ending a mourning period. Each movement felt like a goodbye that I didn't even know I needed to say. I shook out my pants, straightened my sweaty shirt, and looked at him one last time. He didn't look back at me, but he didn't need to. Shame has a way of getting so tangled up in your body that even your eyes know where they shouldn't go. And so, I went. Not for him, but for me. Because carrying hatred for decades stains the soul in a way that only silence can cleanse. Because there are times when talking destroys more than it heals. Because on that park bench, I understood that forgiveness sometimes is just not returning what once hurt us. And I knew that gesture would hurt more than any revenge, not out of malice, but because those who have always been on top don't know the taste of an outstretched hand. Those who have always given orders have never learned to receive. Those who have never needed anyone don't know what to do when someone offers without demanding anything in return. The strangest thing was what came next. Compassion. It was like a warm wind inside, weak but present. Not because of who he was, the arrogant, cruel man who reduced me to less than a human being, but because of what he had become. A bent, dirty old man, abandoned by his own history. A name no one spoke anymore. A body forgotten by his family, by his friends, by the system he once controlled, by the loneliness that makes no noise, but eats at the soul from within. I felt sorry, and that pity hurt me more than all the anger I've ever carried, because his gaze no longer had any shine, no pride, no life. It was an empty gaze, dry, like a well that dried up and no one noticed, a gaze of someone who cried so much inside that not even a tear remained, of someone who imploded inside and was now just the skeleton of what pretended to be invincible. And it was there, standing still, feeling time blow against my face, that I understood. The world turns, and some turns are so slow, so discreet, that we even forget the reason for the wait. We live, fight, swallow, keep quiet, and think that justice will never come. But when it arrives, simply without a stage, without an audience, we understand that it was the right time, it was the right day, it was the right place. And at that moment, everything inside me calmed down. His voice that once haunted me in my dreams fell silent. The phrase, "trash doesn't touch my food," lost its echo. Not because I forgot it, but because it lost its power. And finally, the silence that I had carried for so long became peace. I just wanted to go home, sit on the kitchen chair, take off my shoes, and tell my wife that her bread, that extra bread she always put out with love, had found its rightful destination, that it had been delivered, that it had been needed, that that afternoon it had fed much more than a stomach, it had washed a wound, and more than that, he closed a cycle. Because sometimes the bread we offer is the only gesture that saves us from what life has tried to transform us into. The world turns. Slowly, sometimes, almost still, as if it had forgotten about us. But it turns, and when it turns back, oh my friend, it doesn't warn us, it just comes, and it brings with it everything we left behind, thinking it was too small to matter. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what you never had. Humility, compassion, character. He had it all. Money, power, influence, flatterers, a beautiful woman, a strong name, people opening doors for him wherever he went. He was even afraid. Yes, people were afraid of him. And he mistook that for respect. But now that he had nothing left, no name, no home, no smell of imported cologne, there he was, sitting on a park bench, begging for bread, alone, forgotten, because money buys almost everything, almost. But it doesn't buy good memories. It doesn't buy a sincere hug. It doesn't buy someone who stays when the shine fades. It doesn't buy looking in the mirror without looking away. I thought about this on the way back home, with the light bag in my hand and my heart even lighter. I thought about how fragile this power thing is. Today, you are in charge. Tomorrow, no one will remember your face. I remembered my little daughter waiting for me with her notebook in her hand every time I came home from work. I remembered my wife sharing the last piece of meat with more love than a millionaire's banquet. I remembered my grandchildren on the couch calling me old man with a smile on their faces. And I realized that I was richer than I imagined. The difference is that I just didn't need to lose everything to understand this. Maybe that is true wealth, knowing that life is made of those who stay, of those who listen, of those who extend bread without asking who deserves it. And on that bench in the square, he didn't lose the money. The money was all the world took. What he really lost was everything that money could never give. Respect, clean name, shameless history, and someone to sit next to when the silence hurts too much. I took a deep breath, because there are truths that we only understand when we have lived too much. And I've lived long enough to know that what's truly valuable doesn't fit in your pocket. Today, I am still poor in my pocket. The bills still arrive late, the money still needs to be counted carefully, and the meat on the plate is still a Sunday treat. My clothes are the same as they were years ago. The sole of my boots has given way at the heel, and the house where I live creaks when the wind is strong. But you know, I really don't lack any of that, because inside I'm a different man. I'm rich in soul, rich in peace, rich in silence that no longer weighs. I learned that not every hole hurts forever and that we do survive, even after being stepped on, forgotten, humiliated. What no one tells you is that one day the harvest will come, not the one that fills your hand with money, but the one that soothes your heart, the one that heals the wound, the one that gives back the dignity that was taken from us back then, when we still thought that being good was being weak. He, who once called me trash, discovered that the trash was inside him, not in his clothes, his shoes, or the sidewalk, but in his eyes, in the way he treated others, in his inability to see humanity in someone who didn't have the same last name, the same job title, or the same expensive perfume. And life did the cleaning. It was she, with the relentless delicacy of time, who showed that pride turns to dust, that wealth turns to weight, that power turns to ruin, and that in the end everyone needs to reach out. The difference is in who will have someone to hold on to, and who will reach out into the void. Today, I don't hold a grudge. I don't thirst for revenge. I am grateful because every no I received made me say yes to those who needed it. Every humiliation I swallowed taught me to treat people like people. And every day I was invisible, gave me eyes to see those the world forgets. If I could go back in time, maybe I wouldn't change a thing, because that's exactly how it was. That I learned who I am, not with titles, not with fame, but with silence, with falling, with shared bread. And if there's one thing I want to stay from this story, it's this. It's not what they do to you that defines who you are. It's what you do with what's been done to you. And I chose not to become what he was. I chose to remain a man, even when they called me trash. And that, no one can take it away from me. Telling this hurt, but hiding it for so long hurt even more. For all these years I carried this story like someone carrying a bag of rocks tied to their back. I slept with it, ate with it, kept it close to my chest. And now that I've spoken, that I've let it out slowly like someone letting out a choked sigh, it seems like the weight has lessened. It doesn't go away, no, but it lightens. You listen to me until the end, and that changes everything for me. Because the worst part of pain is not living with it. It's thinking that no one cares about what it did to you. If you've stayed this far, it's because you also have your marks, your silences, your own pieces of memory that burn when no one sees. And for that, I thank you, truly, like someone talking to a family member. Comment here with the word courage if you've ever had to swallow pain alone. Leave a like, follow the channel. Maybe someone else needs to hear this. Maybe unintentionally. You'll help another old man like me find some peace. And if this already hurt you, get ready, because the next story is the cruelest one I've ever told. In the video that appears now, I confess something that to this day I find it hard to breathe to remember. And if this already hurt you, get ready, because the next story isn't just sad. She deceives. You think you understand at first, but when the truth comes out, everything turns upside down. In the video that is on the screen now, there is a confession that begins with love and ends with a choice no one should be forced to make. Assist, but go with your heart prepared.